Before this video begins, just a quick warning that this video will contain major spoilers for the new War questline. I've prolonged the upload of this video for as long as I could to make sure that the majority of the player base have already played through the quest, but of course there will still be a number of people who haven't seen it yet. If you're one of those people, I once again warn you that there will be major spoilers as it is quite impossible to talk about the new War without them. They aren't major spoilers in terms of the story, but rather in terms of the experience that you will have as you play the questline. And be warned as well that as of writing the script, the new War is not a replayable questline unlike the other cinematic quests. So if you want to do something within the quest like take screenshots, record footage, or anything else, be sure to do it as you play through it. You won't be able to replay it once you're finished. With that out of the way, let's get started.
Sync re-engaged. Authorization? Corpus Tech First Class VSO-R. Take your shot. For profit.
The long-awaited New War Cinematic Questline is finally here and it is fucking amazing. Throughout the game's entire lifespan, all the questlines we got are pretty much the same. Go to this place, kill some shit, extract, go to another place, enact a modified version of an already existing mission type, extract, so on and so forth. And the worst kind of questlines are where your progress is time-gated because you have to craft the quest Warframe's parts. I like it in the sense that it further adds to the quest narrative and gives more backstory that the game in general is completely lacking, but it's mostly just not fun to wait for a day just to proceed with the next part of the quest that you probably would just play for about an hour because you have to craft the next part again. And while there isn't anything wrong with that, the quests are part of an online game after all and mostly just exist to either bring in more people or make old players return, it just gets repetitive pretty fast. To be fair, Warframe is a looter shooter and repetitiveness is part of its description, but I'd rather have something new that breaks the regular game cycle. And that's exactly what New War had in store for us. Going into the questline, I was expecting the same sequence, some NPC related to the ever-growing sentient threat calls the Tenno, or a cutscene related to the sentient happens before said NPC calls the Tenno. My optimistic self was expecting that we'll be using our railjack more for this questline since the Sentients are practically a fleet of spaceships. Perhaps it will be similar to railjack missions but with sentient fleets instead of the usual faction that occupies a particular proxima. I thought it would be interesting to see the railjack be prominently used in a major questline since this feature was added to the game partly as a build-up to the new war. However, none of my predictions came true. Well, the new war did have a cutscene related to the sentient at the beginning of the quest, but it wasn't what I was expecting, because new war did something crazy.
Brothers, dead. Only call 175.
I was fucking screaming when this happened. This was a totally different way of going about the questline in this game. And this alone is what made me love it enough to make a video out of it. But that's not where it ends, because after finishing the prologue of the quest, here's what you are greeted with. The new war turns the game completely upside down, turning it into a completely different game. A game that once had uber-powerful machines that could kill anything effortlessly has suddenly become a game where tactics, careful planning, and proper management of your abilities is necessary in order to progress. Have you ever wondered what would happen if Warframe and Destiny 2 had a love child? The majority of the new war questline is probably the answer. You'd be surprised how drastic the change would be in Warframe once you remove the player's ability to bullet jump or kill dozens of enemies with a single button. Speaking of killing enemies with a single button, the abilities you get to use during the questline are pretty interesting as well. It's like those abilities you have when you're playing a stealth game. A heal that gives you a little bit of health at a time, a smoke bomb to render yourself invisible for a period of time while inside the AoE of the ability, and some kind of radar to help you see enemies better and through walls and plan out your route. We have finally gotten the stealth experience that Digital Extremes wanted us to have back in the day. Of course, the enemies are still programmed the same. Getting seen by one enemy even for just a second will alert everyone in the immediate area, but their placements, as well as the placements of blockades, alternate routes, patrol routines, paired with your abilities that are just meant for stealth play, is a really fresh and fun experience that you wouldn't really expect to find in a game like Warframe. There are also enemies that you simply just need to avoid or it's instant game over for you, which further adds to the stealth element of the questline. It's also quite fun to see most of the prominent areas of the game as a human that doesn't have access to Warframes. Like, I know you can just pop your operator out and play as them for the majority of these areas, but it feels quite different when you play as a character that can't go back into their Warframe whenever you want to and has their own set of abilities and weapons. The difference is just so staggering and so amazing to be mesmerized in, I just can't emphasize that enough. Remember the roll feature in this game? Yeah, me neither. Just kidding, rolling is a prominent mechanic especially when traversing long distances while bullet jumping, and is also a core mechanic when playing Limbo, although Limbo's is more of a dash than a roll. But the new war makes you recall that it could also be used to dodge enemy attacks or at the very least, mitigate damage. With no overpowered suit to tank damage for you, nor shields that could further prolong your survivability, combined with a pretty low health pool, you will be constantly rolling around enemy fire and taking cover behind something during combat. If you have told me 2 years ago that I would be taking cover and dodging enemy bullets in Warframe, I would have told you 2 years ago that you'd lost your mind or you have traveled back in time. Grineer napalms and heavy gunners are exceptionally much more dangerous now than ever as they could shut your HP down to almost nothing once their attacks get in contact with you. This is why going in stealthily or taking covers are pretty important to remember while playing through the questline. Fortunately, the weapons that you have are all pretty silent, and by weapons I mean the only 2 weapons that you get for the entire questline. These weapons don't alert anyone when you fire them, especially the bow, so you can dispatch enemies from afar if you'd like, although of course if another enemy sees the body they'll become alerted and start looking for you, and actually prevent you from doing a stealth finisher on them. If you didn't know, this is actually a mechanic that's present in the game, not just in the new war. That's a nifty fun fact for you all. But of course it's not always stealth, because before you finish the necessary missions to progress to the last part of the quest, you have to face some bosses. You only fight 2 bosses during the new war while not having a Warframe, called Archons. To avoid any more major spoilers, these bosses are the only ones that I'll be talking about in this video. All the 3 Archons have cool designs and pretty unique movesets, but that's only because you don't have a Warframe to deal with them. The simplicity of their attacks are their own strengths, since playing as a lone human with no overpowered abilities, it's quite easy to know what attack they're about to unleash and gives you ample time to dodge, thus making it quite fun while also being quite challenging. Most of their attacks apply elemental debuffs to their character, so you really need to be careful around them. However, their simplicity is also their downfall, as once you get your Warframe at the final stretch of the questline, they become absolute jokes. They also have one of the hated mechanics of Warframe bosses, specifically the invulnerable phases that they go to when they reach a certain health threshold. Once they reach this health threshold, the Archons would stop whatever it is they're doing and just stand there untouchable while summoning other enemies that you need to kill so that the Archon would come out of its invulnerable state. The only exception to this is Archon Amar, where instead of going invulnerable, he creates a bunch of clones and you need to find the real one to stop him from healing himself. I know that this is no different from being invulnerable, but at least this one's inspired. He doesn't just go untouchable until the game tells you that it's okay to hit him again. There's actual mechanics to be done in order to prevent him from healing and become touchable again. Overall though, the boss fights presented while you're without a Warframe is a pretty interesting twist and it's really refreshing to play through. No more mindless ability casting and weapon firing, and no more bullet sponge bosses. The invulnerable phases are still quite as annoying as ever, again except for Archon Omar, but I think it's time we accept that it would never go away even if we wanted to. I really wish that we got more of this kind of experience in the future, but that's up to DE.
Once. I think it's just a metaphor.
Sura, do not harm any whom you could save. Kruna Meta.
The new war is really awesome, but that doesn't mean that it's perfect in any way. Perhaps the most glaring issue for me with this questline is that it really doesn't answer any of the questions that people had. Sure, it answered the question how the new war will go about, but it doesn't answer any of the other questions that the players have when it comes to the lore. It feels like this questline only answered the immediate questions that DE themselves have presented years ago through the various quests leading up to the new war, and I just find it really lacking. The game even acknowledged this after you beat the quest, asking the player themselves the question that they might have had while playing through the questline. The questline itself seems to be lacking in my opinion, and this is something that I've noticed with the recent cinematic quests that Warframe had over the years. Don't get me wrong, I liked all of them. They're all fascinating and cool, but there's just this lingering feeling after finishing them that makes you feel that it could have been so much better and could have provided so much more exposition. The new war is the worst offender because this questline goes on for almost 4 hours of non-stop gameplay, meaning no waiting for crafted Warframe parts that artificially increases the quest length, and yet it still feels like it's holding back. I'm threading a very thin line here to avoid spoilers, but in the promotional teasers and trailers, they always use the fleet of Sentients and the Sentient Mother as the star of the questline. So obviously you'd expect to find a bunch of sentient ships during the questline, but you don't. Instead of actually participating in, the new war, because this is supposed to be a reference to the old war where the Orokin and the Sentients clash, only this time it's the Sentients versus the whole galaxy, you are instead thrown in the aftermath of the war. I don't mind that as evident from the previous minutes of this video, but I really hope to experience an actual clash between the Sentient and their ships with the Tenno and their unlikely allies. Instead, we get an in medias res kind of thing and then fast forwarded us to the events after the war. Again, I'm not saying that I didn't like the direction that DE went with this. I know this is something similar to the 7-hour war or whatever from Half-Life 2. I'm just saying that they could have added just a bit more segment during the actual war. There were also a number of missing characters and factions that you'd expect to at least talk a line or two because of their relevance to the Sentients, the Void, the Tenno, or the Orokins, but they're nowhere to be found. And it just adds more questions to the millions that players already have about the lore of this game. The new war is a massive questline to be added to Warframe, and it's a fantastic quest to play through. It deviates from the usual Warframe questline formula and introduces a bunch of new, interesting, and refreshing gameplay that I'm pretty sure is a welcome addition to the game. I hope this is a sign that Warframe will be taking this as the new standard for future cinematic quests and a foundation and basis for any future new game modes that Digital Extremes has in store for us. New War still suffers the same problems that I had with previous cinematic quests, namely the lack of actual exposition and the feeling that it somehow feels lacking even though the questline itself was hours long. There were also characters that you'd expect to have a role in this questline but were not present, which was just confusing to say the least. It also gives players more questions about the game's lore than it gives answers. But I think the pros definitely outweighs the cons, and at the end of the day, the New War questline was definitely worth the wait and deserved all the hype that it got throughout the years. Overall, the New War questline is definitely a quest that delivers the hype and excitement that surrounded it, and I'm glad that I was part of the community that gets to experience it. I've said it countless times, and I'll say it again. The New War is a fantastic questline and every Warframe player definitely needs to play it.